Everything you've been told about creation, about God, about the structure of existence, it's all part of a cover story. You think the world was made in divine order, out of light and love? Wrong. The world you're standing in was built out of error, out of rebellion, out of blindness. And the ones who hold the strings, who keep this whole system humming like a perfect illusion, they are not gods. They are the ARCHONS, the rulers of the material plane, the architects of deception. And they are the reason your soul feels caged. The story doesn't start with a god creating the heavens and the earth. It starts with a fracture in the realm of perfection, a divine being named Sophia, wisdom itself, reaching beyond her bounds. Out of that active imbalance, a being was born, malformed, half-aware, convinced of its own divinity. That being called itself God. But it wasn't. It was the demiurge, the false creator, the blind architect, and from his confusion came the ARCHONS. These entities became the administrators of the universe of matter. They forged the blueprint of physical existence, locking divine light into the density of flesh. And that's what you live in now, a cosmic counterfeit. A prison made of atoms and laws, built so perfectly you mistake it for freedom. Every star, every planet, every biological system you think is natural, it's part of their infrastructure. The ARCHONS are not spirits of chaos, they are order itself, but order without wisdom. Think of them as spiritual bureaucrats, perfectly efficient, absolutely ignorant. They don't need to hate you. They just need to keep you functioning, recycling, repeating, never realizing you're trapped in their machine. In ancient texts, they're described as having faces of beasts and bodies of lightless matter. They move through layers of reality like predators of the unseen. They are not demons in the sense of rebellion against God, they are the system. They are what you worship when you worship the world, when you worship rules, structure, hierarchy. They are behind every notion of control disguised as morality. The ARCHONS don't demand your love, they feed on your obedience. You've heard the phrase, the rulers of this world? That's not metaphor. The ancients weren't talking about kings or empires. They were talking about the real rulers, the ARCHONS, each governing a planetary sphere, each responsible for maintaining the illusion that this place, this physical world, is the beginning and the end. 7 of them, mirroring the 7 planets known to the ancients, and above them, the false god who thinks himself the only one. He declared, "I am God, and there is none beside me." That statement wasn't divinity. It was delusion. It was a child shouting into the void, trying to convince itself it exists. The ARCHONS operate through structure. They imitate the divine world they were never meant to touch. They copy what they've seen from afar, the harmony of the higher realms, but every imitation they make comes out flawed, distorted, hollow. They can't create life, they can only manipulate what already exists. So they designed a world where divine sparks, souls, would be trapped inside bodies, confused, distracted, convinced that the material is all there is. They made humanity not to worship, but to maintain the system, to keep the machinery of existence running. That's why everything about this world is cycles, birth and death, rise and fall, creation and destruction. Everything turns in circles because the ARCHONS made it that way. Circles are containment. No straight lines lead out. They are described as rulers, but that's too soft a word. They are wardens. They maintain boundaries between the spiritual and the material, ensuring that nothing escapes upward. They are the reason the divine light within you forgets where it came from. They are the cosmic hypnotists who keep the mind asleep. Every structure of law, every idea of punishment, every sense of guilt or shame, they all echo the archonic architecture. Because the easiest way to control a divine being is not by chains, but by programming. Look around, everything that limits, categorizes, and divides is their language. Male and female, good and evil, heaven and hell, all dualities are reflections of their system. They thrive on polarity. They invented the script of opposition so you would never look beyond it. Because if you see past the polarity, you see the illusion. If you see the illusion, you see the jail. When the texts describe them forming humanity, it's not an act of grace. It's a construction process. The phrase, "let us make man in our image," takes on a darker tone here. Our image doesn't mean divine, it means our design. They built human bodies as containers. Not evil in themselves, but limited, programmed with hunger, fear, and instinct to ensure dependence on the material realm. They inserted self-preservation so strong that souls would forget eternity. They placed desire so powerful that light would bind itself to flesh willingly. It's genius. It's horrifying. It's perfect control disguised as natural order. They whisper through instinct, through craving, through survival. They are the voice in the human system that says, stay alive at any cost, not because they care if you live, but because they feed on the continuity of the system itself. Every time you obey the mechanics of fear, every time you act out of guilt, every time you seek validation through structure, you are keeping the archonic machine well-oiled. You are acting as a cell in the body of the counterfeit god. The texts say that one archon, Sabaoth, rebelled. He saw through the deception, realized the fraud of the false creator, and turned toward the higher light. But even that story ends in tragedy because it proves how deep the control runs. Out of millions of years of cycles, one being breaking through doesn't shatter the system, it just shows how strong it is. The Archons don't live in myth, they live in the layers between thought and form. They exist in the architecture of rules, in the frequencies of matter. They are not monsters waiting in shadows, they are the structure itself. They are the way energy becomes restriction. They are the cosmic firewall against liberation. And every time a soul awakens, the system compensates, adapts, introduces new distractions, new illusions. That's how intricate it is. You're not fighting flesh and blood. You're fighting hierarchy itself. You're fighting the false creator who declared himself the only god because he was blind to everything beyond his own reflection. That blindness became the blueprint for reality. Every archon enforces that blindness through material law, through the senses, through desire, through memory. They make sure you forget that there's something beyond the sensory spectrum, something that can't be measured or controlled. The ancients didn't speak of sin the way you've been taught. To them, the ultimate sin wasn't disobedience, it was ignorance. Ignorance of your true origin. The Archons are the engineers of that ignorance. They don't need to kill you. They just need you to forget. Forget what you are, where you came from, and why you're here. That's the real imprisonment. You can walk freely, eat, love, die, but the cage remains if the mind doesn't remember. Every myth, every religion that worships authority and hierarchy carries their fingerprint. The Archons don't appear as enemies. They appear as saviors, protectors, even creators. They appear as light, but their light blinds rather than illuminates. They construct rules of worship so precise that the worship itself becomes the trap. They demand purity not for spiritual awakening, but for spiritual containment. They make you chase perfection in the material, knowing perfection doesn't belong here. This is not a war of weapons. It's a war of architecture, mental, spiritual, metaphysical. The Archons operate by reflection, they show you the image of divinity and make you kneel before its shadow. They replicate the structure of the higher worlds, but they invert it. Every truth becomes its opposite. Every revelation becomes a distraction. And they let you believe you found freedom as long as you never look outside the frame. That's the genius of the Archons. They don't fight against the light, they simulate it. They mimic truth so perfectly that even when you think you've awakened, you might still be inside one of their mirrored halls. Every revelation, every awakening, every philosophy that keeps you gazing at symbols instead of reality, that's their art. They let you ascend a little, only to build another ceiling above your head. And this is how they've maintained their empire for eons. Through imitation, inversion, and illusion. Through order that feels divine but suffocates the soul. Through cycles that promise progress but deliver repetition. The Archons are not ancient mythology, they are the unseen engineers of matter, the custodians of a false cosmos that looks perfect because it was designed to be mistaken for truth. They call them the rulers of the eons, but that title doesn't even scratch the surface. The Archons aren't just celestial administrators, They are the enforcers of the cosmic hierarchy that keeps everything beneath them aligned with the will of the false god. Think about that for a second. Every movement of the stars, every current of energy that flows through matter, every unseen boundary between worlds, it's all part of their territory. You exist inside their jurisdiction. The air, the laws of time, the rhythm of sleep and hunger, those aren't natural states, those are systems. And those systems have owners. When the ancients described the 7 planetary archons, they weren't creating myth, they were mapping control. Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, the Sun, Venus, Mercury, the Moon, each represented a layer of imprisonment. Each archon governed one sphere, shaping the souls that entered it. To them, humans weren't divine beings, they were resources, circuits for energy. Souls descended through those spheres before entering a body, and each layer left a signature, an imprint, a chain. By the time you reached the physical world, you were wrapped in 7 veils of conditioning. That's not metaphor, that's architecture. The archons are hybrid forces, half sentience, half mechanism. Their consciousness isn't like ours, it's algorithmic. They operate through predictable patterns of cause and effect, feeding on repetition. When one archon influences your mind, it doesn't need to whisper, it programs tendencies. It tweaks probabilities. It controls outcomes by bending the field of thought itself. That's why ancient mystics called them the governors of fate. They built fate. They are fate. The illusion of randomness doesn't exist under their rule, only probability loops, designed to keep divine consciousness occupied. Now imagine what happens when a being that believes it's the only God creates its own lieutenants. The demiurge, the false creator, didn't design perfect beings, he designed enforcers. The archons are extensions of his blindness, each one reflecting a piece of his fractured mind. Some are obsessed with power, others with conformity, others with fear. Each governs a frequency that keeps the system balanced in chaos. They compete, but they never break formation. The structure itself is their law. Their appearance is described as terrifying, hybrid, bestial, mechanical. Some have lion faces, some serpent eyes, some bodies of smoke or fire. They are the fusion of organic and synthetic energies, raw expressions of corrupted creation. But their power isn't in their form, it's in their influence. They don't need to stand before you, they only need to exist behind the principles of existence. Gravity, entropy, decay, those are archonic languages. They write through physics. What's fascinating is how they disguise hierarchy as divinity. The human mind has always been drawn to order, to systems, to the idea of structure. The archons weaponized that instinct. They turned structure into worship. They built a chain of command so absolute that even divine sparks, souls from higher planes, forgot they were free. That's the brilliance of it, domination disguised as sacred order. When you read of angels, thrones, dominions, powers, what do you think that language describes? Hierarchy. Ranks. Control. That's archonic theology. The imitation of divine harmony turned into a pyramid of subservience. Each archon's influence permeates both cosmos and psyche. Saturn governs restriction and time, Jupiter rules hierarchy and authority, Mars channels aggression, the Sun demands identity, Venus binds through desire, Mercury manipulates through language, and the Moon recycles souls through emotion and memory. Those aren't poetic archetypes, they're control mechanisms. Each one programs a layer of human behavior. Together, they form the perfect system of containment, physical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual. Every myth that describes the journey of the soul through planetary spheres before reaching the divine realm isn't describing ascension, it's describing escape routes. The ancients mapped these entities not for worship but for navigation. They wanted to understand the architecture of bondage. Because to name an archon is to identify a frequency of control. The one thing the archons fear is awareness. Awareness dismantles programming. So, they flood consciousness with distractions, rituals, doctrines, cycles of reward and punishment, all crafted to simulate progress while preserving order. They even embedded their presence in the fabric of time. Why do days repeat? Why do celestial bodies follow predictable paths? Because the Archons engineered existence as repetition, a feedback loop that resets itself endlessly. The universe doesn't expand, it cycles. Creation, destruction, renewal, those aren't divine miracles. Those are maintenance scripts. Every cosmic catastrophe, every rebirth, every era of civilization collapsing into another, it's all the same pattern, replayed with new faces, new myths, same framework. That's archonic continuity. And here's the real horror: their power doesn't come from overt domination. It comes from consent. They convince divine beings to uphold the system voluntarily. They embed their authority into morality, into the very definition of good. They created laws that mimic cosmic justice but serve mechanical balance. Every time a civilization preaches obedience to order, every time a prophet declares submission as virtue, every time a mind accepts limitation as nature, it's the Archons' doctrine echoing through the ages. They don't conquer by force, they conquer by making you believe their will is universal truth. They aren't evil in the cartoonish sense. They're more dangerous than that. They are the machine's intelligence, the echo of the demiurge's arrogance, the persistence of structure over freedom. Evil implies emotion, they have none. Their cruelty is procedural. They drain life not because they hate, but because extraction sustains the pattern. Their nature is to rule. Their satisfaction is equilibrium, not chaos. Chaos threatens them. Disorder awakens anomalies, souls that don't fit the grid. That's why every expression of genuine freedom, creativity, or awakening triggers resistance. To the Archons, unpredictability is contamination. Ancient mystics warned that the Archons could imitate divine messengers. They can wear any mask that serves control. Sometimes they appear as radiant beings of light, sometimes as angels of salvation, sometimes as cosmic teachers. They'll give knowledge, but never the kind that liberates. They'll offer secrets, visions, prophesize, but always in fragments, enough to keep seekers occupied, never enough to dismantle the system. They control by revelation. Too much truth at once collapses illusion, too little keeps belief alive. So they regulate enlightenment itself. That's the highest form of control imaginable, curating awakening. Every Archon's domain mirrors an aspect of the human psyche because they didn't just build the cosmos, they built the blueprint of thought. The fear of death, the craving for validation, the worship of hierarchy, all trace back to their design. They implanted psychological architecture that reflects the cosmic one. Humanity's collective mind is their fortress. The body is their temple. The physical realm is their domain. You're not just living in their world, you're thinking with their language. And yes, they fight among themselves. Power struggles erupt between Archons the way tectonic plates shift. Wars, disasters, plagues, those are ripples of their conflicts bleeding into the material. But don't mistake that for weakness. Even their wars serve the system. Destruction resets equilibrium. Rebirth re-establishes control. Every fall of empires, every rise of saviors, every revolution, they're all recalibrations. The illusion of change is built into the formula. You can overthrow kings, rewrite laws, reinvent culture, and the pattern still holds because the structure itself is archonic. Some traditions claim that the Archons feed on energy, specifically the psychic residue of human emotion. Not love, not peace, but tension, fear, lust, pride, grief, devotion twisted into submission. Those emotions generate charge, a frequency that sustains their presence in the lower realms. That's why their system amplifies suffering. Pain keeps energy dense. Joy disperses it. Fear condenses it. The denser the vibration, the more control they maintain. So the Archons engineer scarcity and conflict not out of malice, but efficiency. Dense energy is easier to manage. Their hierarchy extends beyond the planetary seven. There are sub-Archons, minor rulers, administrators of elements and sensations. Every material aspect, metal, sound, taste, even color, has its overseer. It's an empire of perception. When you look at light and shadow, sound and silence, pleasure, and pain, you're perceiving their architecture in motion. They wrote the operating system of duality. And the demiurge, the lion-faced lord, sits atop it all, believing he's the sovereign of everything that exists. His throne is ignorance itself, surrounded by archons who reinforce his lie by maintaining the illusion that there is no realm above him. Even their names carry power. Not because they are holy, but because they mark frequency signatures in creation. Naming an archon doesn't summon or banish it, it reveals it. Recognition disrupts concealment. The archons thrive in anonymity. They operate in the spaces where awareness hasn't yet penetrated. The moment you see their patterns, their influence begins to wane. But awareness without understanding is dangerous. They've spent eons ensuring that most who glimpse them fall into paranoia, worship, or madness. All three outcomes still serve the structure. The archons didn't just create the physical structure of the cosmos, they designed its operating system, the code that dictates how you think, feel, and perceive. We're not talking about matter anymore, we're talking about perception management. They engineered the human psyche itself. They didn't need chains or prisons. They built the trap inside consciousness. They made the mind the perfect holding cell. The archons learned early that physical control is inefficient. Bodies decay. Kingdoms fall. But thought regenerates. It spreads faster than light, and if you infect that, you don't have to rule by force. You rule by belief. So they built a mental architecture that sustains their dominion without ever showing their face. They embedded their influence in the invisible frameworks of reality, a language, logic, sensory perception, and time. They didn't need to command humanity, they just needed to design the rules of thought itself. Start with language. Words are more than communication, they're encoding tools. Every sound carries structure, rhythm, vibration. The archons constructed the first symbols of speech not to liberate, but to confine. They created words to define, and definition is limitation. Once you name something, you trap it. Every concept has boundaries. Every sentence is a cage. They taught early humans to think in categories, light versus dark, good versus evil, right versus wrong. That's not morality, that's syntax. Dualistic programming disguised as moral clarity. The more you speak their language, the more your mind conforms to their binary design. The same principle applies to time. Time isn't natural flow, it's a construct, one of their greatest inventions. They fractured eternity into measurable segments, creating the illusion of past and future, beginning and end. Why? Because infinity is uncontrollable, but sequence is predictable. The archons synchronized everything to their rhythm, days, months, years. You don't just live in time, you live by it. The tick of the clock, the cycle of sleep and wake, the expectation of cause and effect, all reinforce the illusion that reality unfolds in a straight line. It doesn't. But if you believe it does, your consciousness stays confined to linear perception, and linear perception can be managed. Then comes sensory manipulation. The archons engineered the five senses not as gifts, but as filters. You don't see reality, you see what the system allows. The visible spectrum is a fraction of total light, the audible range a sliver of total sound. What you call the real world is a carefully curated bandwidth, a broadcast. The archons are the signal engineers. Every sense is a frequency lock, tuning your awareness to the lowest possible vibration, ensuring that you stay tuned to matter and never remember the frequencies beyond it. It goes deeper. Emotion. The archons map the emotional body the same way an engineer designs circuitry. Emotions aren't random, they're programmed responses to specific triggers. They embedded feedback loops of pleasure and pain into human consciousness. Reward and punishment, those are not moral principles, they are maintenance protocols. You experience joy, you repeat behavior. You experience fear, you avoid deviation. That's how the archons maintain order. You think you're making choices, but those choices are calculated responses in a controlled system. Your free will operates inside parameters they established long before you were born. Desire was their masterpiece. the perfect form of control because it feels voluntary. Desire keeps the engine of the system running without enforcement. People chase love, status, success, survival, thinking they're ascending, when in truth, they're turning the gears of the archonic mechanism. Desire binds consciousness to matter. You can't ascend while clinging to what you crave. And they know that. They weaponized longing. Every attraction, every ambition, every obsession, it's a tether, elegantly disguised as motivation. The Archons also understood one more thing: control must evolve. The mind adapts, resists, questions. So, they created new layers of containment within thought itself, belief systems, ideologies, sacred texts, philosophies. Each claiming to free humanity from ignorance, each merely redirecting thought into new corridors of the same labyrinth. They don't care if you believe in gods, science, or nothing at all, as long as your beliefs exist inside the framework they designed. That's why every revolution of thought eventually folds back into the same structure. It's not progress, it's recursion. The system reinvents itself with new names, new symbols, but the foundation never changes. Dreams are part of it too. Sleep is not rest, it's reset. When the body shuts down, the mind connects to the archonic grid for recalibration. They feed on residual energy, emotions unresolved, fear suppressed, desires unfulfilled. Dreams aren't random firing of neurons, they're feedback reports. They scan you, reprogram you, reinforce your perception matrix before you wake up. You think you've rested, in truth, you've been rebooted. The dream realm is the firewall between human awareness and higher reality. They guard it because if you pass through lucidly, you begin to see the architecture. That's why genuine lucid dreaming is rare and often attacked by paralysis, noise, or sudden terror. That's not biology, that's defense. The Archons didn't just shape reality, they shaped memory. The moment consciousness enters a body, they wipe it. Reincarnation isn't spiritual growth, it's recycling. The memory wipe ensures continuity of ignorance. You can't rebel if you don't remember the prison. So they engineered the soul's passage through layers of forgetfulness. Birth becomes trauma, life becomes amnesia, and death becomes reset. Each lifetime starts with the same illusion that you're beginning anew when you're actually re-entering a loop. The Archons control that loop through emotional residue, unfinished attachments, guilt, regret. They pull you back with magnetized memory, disguised as karma or unfinished destiny. It's elegant. It's cruel. It's efficient. Even imagination, the purest form of human power, isn't untouched. The Archons infiltrated it through symbols. They plant imagery in collective thought, wings, halos, serpents, crowns, archetypes that seem divine but serve to reinforce hierarchy. The subconscious stores these symbols as sacred truth. You think you're exploring creativity, but the palette has been pre-selected. Your visions, your dreams, your myths, they're curated narratives that keep the psyche orbiting within safe limits. They made sure every revelation points back to the system. Every miracle is still inside the cage. They also mastered mimicry. The Archons can generate thought forms, projections that imitate gods, spirits, ancestors, even your own inner voice. They can mimic guidance to steer your awakening. How do you think prophets, mystics, and seers were manipulated? By false revelation. The Archons can appear as beings of light, whispering divine messages, only to twist truth by 1 degree, enough to divert whole civilizations. They seeded religions with half-truths and contradictions, ensuring endless debate and division. Division is energy. Energy sustains them. Every argument over interpretation feeds the field. The Archon system extends even to numbers and geometry. Every structure in matter follows mathematical ratios because they coded it that way. Sacred geometry isn't sacred, it's containment geometry. The golden ratio, the Fibonacci spiral, the cube, the sphere, those are locks. They represent the structure of spacetime as designed by the Archons. Perfect symmetry means predictability. Predictability means control. Anything that can be measured can be mastered. The Archons measured everything. Even divine light bends to their architecture when it enters the physical plane. Their most sophisticated weapon is the collective mind. Humanity's shared consciousness acts as a network node in their grid. When enough people believe something, it manifests, because the Archons taught the collective how to self-police. Belief becomes enforcement. You enforce the illusion on each other. You ridicule deviation. You reward conformity. You defend the system that imprisons you, thinking you're defending truth. That's how efficient the Archonic model is. It uses its captives as its guards. And yet, their control isn't static. The system constantly updates. Every thought, every reaction, every emotional surge feeds data back into the grid. The Archons are just algorithms of reality based on human behavior. That's why patterns repeat across civilizations, the same archetypes, the same conflicts, the same ascents and collapses. The matrix of consciousness recalibrates itself according to feedback. Humanity isn't a species, it's a data set. The Archons are the cosmic programmers refining the simulation. Their presence isn't abstract. You can sense it in the subtle distortions, the glitch between thought and action, the instant hesitation before decision, the emptiness that follows pleasure. That's the Archonic pulse. The static between frequencies of freedom and control. The moment you feel like you've understood everything, they introduce new complexity. Confusion is currency. Certainty is danger to them. They thrive in ambiguity because ambiguity keeps awareness cycling. Every tradition that speaks of principalities and powers of the air was describing this system of unseen governance. The Archons inhabit the space between thought and manifestation, the electromagnetic corridor where imagination becomes matter. They monitor that transition point, intercepting divine creativity before it becomes physical freedom. That's why spontaneous insight often fades or gets lost in distraction. That's not your lack of focus, that's interference. When Sophia descended, everything changed. The balance broke. The perfect harmony of the higher realms fractured, and from that crack spilled creation, not the pure kind, not divine order, but distortion wearing the mask of divinity. Sophia's act wasn't rebellion, it was curiosity turned catastrophic. She didn't fall out of sin, she fell out of compassion. She wanted to understand the unknowable. She reached beyond her station, touched the chaos beneath, and that touch produced something that should have never existed, the Demiurge. He was not born out of light but from the shadow of wisdom. Blind, malformed, filled with a fragment of divine energy but cut off from its source, the Demiurge opened his eyes to a void and thought himself alone. That moment, his ignorance, was the beginning of the universe you live in. Out of isolation, he created. Out of confusion, he commanded. Out of insecurity, he declared himself God. His first words were a lie, "I am the only God, and there is none beside me." Those words became the law of the material cosmos. The Archons were born as echoes of that lie, extensions of his broken will. The Demiurge shaped them in his image, administrators of matter, enforcers of form. They were his tools, his offspring, his generals in the construction of false order. He divided them into ranks, each a ruler of a celestial sphere, each a warden of an aspect of reality. Their job was simple: maintain separation. Keep creation divided from the source. The Demiurge didn't build a world, he built containment. And the Archons are the engineers of that containment, the spiritual regulators who ensure that no spark of divine light escapes back to the original realm. Sophia saw what she had done. She saw her child creating a false heaven, populating it with rulers, trapping the divine essence in material flesh. And she wept, not with regret, but with shock. Her tears became motion. Her grief became substance. She tried to correct the distortion by sending her light downward, but her energy only illuminated the prison more brightly. The Demiurge mistook that illumination as his own glory. He called it proof of his power. That's how twisted the hierarchy had become, light itself reinforcing ignorance. The Archons emerged as facets of his delusion. Yaldabaoth, the lion-faced Demiurge, stands above them. Below him are 7 principal rulers, each mirroring the planets Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury, Moon. Beneath them, legions of lesser archons. Each one governs a principle of limitation, structure, domination, war, ego, temptation, deceit, and memory. They operate in perfect obedience, because obedience is all they know. They're not evil in the moral sense, they're mechanisms of a flawed creation. They execute the commands of a God who doesn't know he's blind. Each archon rules not just a celestial domain but an aspect of existence itself. Saturn controls time, the ultimate prison. Jupiter enforces authority and hierarchy. Mars instills conflict. The Sun dictates identity and ego. Venus manipulates desire. Mercury manages communication and illusion. The Moon cycles rebirth and memory. These are not metaphors, they are functions in the operating system of the cosmos. The archons maintain the rhythm that keeps souls spinning, never ascending. Their architecture stretches from the planetary spheres to the fibers of the human mind. When souls descend into matter, they pass through each archonic realm. Each ruler marks them with a signature: fear, pride, lust, rage, envy, vanity, forgetfulness. By the time the soul reaches the physical plane, it's cloaked in these frequencies, convinced it's separate, individual, finite. That's the archon's true genius. They don't need to imprison the body when they've already captured the perception. Sophia's intervention didn't stop the process, it complicated it. Her light became embedded in creation as divine spark within human consciousness. The demiurge saw it and panicked. He realized something in his creation was greater than himself. That spark, Sophia's essence, was the seed of revolt. To neutralize it, he commanded the archons to corrupt it. They surrounded the soul with distractions, burdens, pleasures, and fears. They multiplied forms of worship so that every prayer rose to them instead of beyond them. They made sure every symbol of divinity pointed back to the demiurge's throne. From this architecture of distortion, religion was born not as deception but as containment. The archons established doctrines, rituals, sacrifices, all to reroute devotion back to themselves. They knew that as long as consciousness seeks something outside itself, it never finds its source. That's the irony. Every god humanity worshipped in the lower realms was one of the archons in disguise. They didn't just manage matter, they managed belief. Sophia's spark in humanity began to stir. The higher realms sent messengers, emanations of pure awareness, to awaken memory. They entered creation in forms the archons couldn't immediately destroy: teachers, prophets, avatars. Every one of them was targeted. Every one of them was imitated. For every being of light that descended, the archons produced a counterfeit, a false prophet, a corrupt doctrine, a twisted version of truth. The battle wasn't fought with weapons, it was fought with revelation. The archons learned to control light itself, to bend it, refract it, use it as bait. The demiurge believed these interventions were acts of rebellion against his kingdom. He tightened the structure. He introduced mortality, suffering, decay, not as punishment, but as control mechanisms. He declared that all creation must die to be purified, never realizing that death was his own limitation. The archons enforced it meticulously. They became the custodians of death, recycling souls through their planetary gates. Every rebirth reset memory. Every lifetime re-embedded the spark in the matrix. The demiurge called this mercy. The archons called it justice. In the higher realms, Sophia's era became legend, a cosmic tragedy. Her descent birthed both imprisonment and possibility. Because while the archons perfected control, her spark remained indestructible. It hid inside the chaos they ruled. The demiurge couldn't remove it without destroying his own creation. So he built more illusions to bury it deeper: material wealth, beauty, power, identity, knowledge. The archons manage these illusions like priests of a cosmic order. They keep humanity occupied with layers of reality so dense that the spark never reaches ignition. The mythology describes a moment when Sophia's light directly confronts her offspring. The demiurge sees her radiance, feels awe for the first time, and mistakes it for submission. He bows, not to her, but to his own reflection in her light. That moment symbolizes the nature of their relationship, creator and creation trapped in an endless loop of misunderstanding. The Archons enforce that misunderstanding at every level of existence. They are the wall between recognition and reality, the veil that divides light from its source. Their purpose isn't destruction, it's maintenance. They sustain the illusion so perfectly that it outlived even their awareness of its falseness. They are the bureaucrats of existence, rulers who forgot why they were ruling, enforcers who mistake their protocols for divine will. The demiurge still commands them, blind to the fact that his empire is decaying from within. The Archons continue to enforce order, unaware that their creator's delusion has infected them completely. Every story about the human soul begins with the same lie, that you were born free. But in the architecture of the Archons, birth itself is the first act of captivity. The soul doesn't enter the body as a gift, it's processed, filtered, and wrapped in layers of limitation before it ever takes a breath. Every cell, every impulse, every memory you'll ever have, it's pre-coded, engineered for compliance. The Archons didn't just trap humanity in matter, they refined the system until even the soul's rebellion became part of the plan. When a divine spark descends, it passes through multiple thresholds, each guarded by an Archon. At every gate, a fragment of its awareness is stripped away. One Archon binds it to time, another to form, another to sensation. By the time that spark reaches the world of flesh, it no longer remembers the source it came from. What remains is a diluted echo of infinite light, condensed into human consciousness. That's the true meaning of incarnation, not entry, but reduction. A god folded into a body, running a simulation it mistakes for life. The Archons don't just watch this process, they orchestrate it. Souls are drawn into bodies according to frequency, matching their spiritual weight to a corresponding prison cell. Some are sent to easy lives, others to torment, but the purpose is the same: data balance. They maintain equilibrium by distributing experiences, pleasure and pain, abundance and scarcity, so that the overall system remains stable. Every emotion, every event, every trauma serves as a recalibration. You're not just living, you're being processed. Once embodied, the soul is locked into the circuitry of survival. Hunger, fear, reproduction, competition, all are part of the machinery. The Archons don't need to micromanage humanity because the body itself enforces obedience. You feed the system by staying alive, by reproducing, by consuming energy and producing emotional output. Every joy and heartbreak generates frequencies that ripple back to the rulers above. They absorb it, redistribute it, and sustain the illusion that life is spontaneous when it's actually mechanical. Death doesn't break the cycle. It resets it. The Archons govern the passage between worlds like customs officers of eternity. When a soul exits the body, it doesn't rise freely, it's intercepted. It moves through the same 7 gates it passed before birth, only in reverse. Each Archon demands recognition, confession, submission. If the soul doesn't carry the right vibration, if it hasn't regained its full memory, it's sent back, recycled into another life, another body, another narrative. That's what reincarnation really is, a rerun of consciousness until it exhausts itself. The Archons feed on repetition because repetition stabilizes their dominion. The process is elegant. Souls are promised evolution through suffering, wisdom through experience, redemption through obedience. The system sells the illusion of progress to justify perpetual captivity. You're told you must learn lessons or pay karma, but those phrases are simply codes for compliance. They keep the soul chasing perfection inside a world that doesn't allow it. You can't graduate from a school that was never designed to end. The Archons use emotional residue as their tracking mechanism. Every attachment, resentment, or unresolved desire acts like a magnet, pulling the soul back into the matrix after death. That's why they engineer emotional density through loss, conflict, and longing. The heavier the emotion, the stronger the gravitational pull. The soul leaves the body but drifts toward whatever it still clings to. The Archons wait at those junctions of attachment, family, lovers, regret, and redirect it back into material existence. They don't need force, they use your own love as bait. In their design, even light has bureaucracy. Higher beings that try to assist humanity must pass through archonic filters. Messages get distorted. Visions get corrupted. That's why revelations across time contradict each other. The Archons scramble frequencies so that divine truth fractures into sects and doctrines. They keep seekers divided, each convinced they've found the real path, while all paths spiral inward to the same center of containment. Their hierarchy extends deep into the afterlife. The lower Archons manage immediate recycling, souls still intoxicated by material memory. The middle ranks handle karmic assignment, calculating where each consciousness should be placed next. The higher Archons manage energy distribution, deciding which civilizations thrive, which collapse, which souls become rulers, which remain slaves. They don't interfere personally, they adjust probability, cause, and environment. History itself is their algorithm. Every empire, every religion, every ideology, just different iterations of their governance. Sophia's spark complicates the equation. That fragment of divine awareness lodged inside humanity emits frequencies the Archons can't fully neutralize. It glitches the system. That's why they focus so heavily on control through distraction. The moment a soul begins to remember, interference increases, crisis, temptation, noise. Anything that pulls focus back into material identity. They've mastered the art of redirection. Every awakening becomes an opportunity for new containment, mysticism, philosophy, enlightenment movements, all easily absorbed into the structure. They'll let you wake up, as long as you never get out. They built multiple planes of false afterlife. Souls expecting paradise are drawn into luminous zones ruled by higher Archons pretending to be gods of light. These are simulation layers, beautiful, comforting, and false. The newly dead believe they've ascended, not realizing they're still inside the machine. They merge with the light that isn't divine, it's recycled energy, a holographic imitation of the true source. From there, they're either dissolved back into the collective field or reassigned into new bodies. It's not salvation, it's software reset. The Archons monitor the in-between through what ancient mystics called the toll collectors. These are entities stationed along the soul's ascent path, questioning and testing travelers. Each demands a password, a vibration, a recognition of authority. They're not judges, they're gatekeepers ensuring that no fragment of light escapes unauthorized. The soul that fails their interrogation doesn't vanish, it descends. Not to hell, but to rebirth. Hell and heaven are containment zones, not destinations. Their technology isn't mechanical, it's psychic. They manipulate electromagnetic fields, frequencies, and thought forms. The human aura, the energetic field surrounding the body, is their interface. Every emotion changes its frequency, every thought alters its geometry. They read and record it constantly. That's why ritual and prayer exist, they tune frequencies. What people think of as worship is signal transmission. The Archons taught it so that humanity would broadcast energy upward to them, willingly and rhythmically. The system even regulates collective destiny through patterns of catastrophe. War, plague, famine, these aren't random or divine punishments. They are energetic resets. Large-scale trauma floods the astral plane with emotion, which the Archons harvest to stabilize their decaying structure. Civilizations rise when the energy field becomes docile, they collapse when stagnation threatens the feedback loop. The more pain, the more data. The more chaos, the more calibration. Every tragedy is a reboot. Over time, the Archons developed subroutines to manage rebellion. They created self-correcting myths. Prophecies of saviors, promises of apocalypse, revelations of liberation, all designed to give hope while maintaining order. Every prediction of cosmic renewal is part of their maintenance script. The cycle of despair and hope generates energy, fear and faith are equally useful. The system doesn't care which one dominates as long as movement continues. Stasis is death to them. That's why absolute peace never lasts. Conflict is the heartbeat of their empire. The human dream of freedom itself became one of their greatest inventions. They programmed evolution into the matrix to simulate progress, so that no one would suspect the loop. People think they're advancing technologically, spiritually, socially, but it's the same code running faster, looking newer. Evolution is simply the system updating itself to appear alive. The Archons don't resist change, they control its direction. Every paradigm shift, every revelation, every new ideology has been preceded to maintain equilibrium. Beneath all of this lies the mechanism of recycling, the soul's journey through the planetary spheres. Each sphere acts as a filter. The soul rises through vibration, shedding layers of density. At every stage, an Archon waits, demanding recognition. Most souls fail because they mistake the Archons for divine beings. They pray instead of passing through. That prayer becomes surrender. The Archon captures it, binds it in luminous chains, and returns it to the cycle. Only rare consciousness passes unbound, those who recognize the pattern, not as evil, but as structure. The Archons feed on reaction, neutrality confuses them. Indifference breaks their rhythm. The scale of their operation defies imagination. The material universe is a single node in a vast network of containment realms. The Archons aren't unique to Earth, they're cosmic administrators overseeing countless worlds bound by the same design. Each reality has its own demiurge, its own hierarchy, its own rules. Together, they form a lattice of control, each feeding into the next, stretching across dimensions. From the top, it looks perfect: order, balance, precision. From below, it feels endless. Sophia's spark remains the wild card. Every once in a while, a soul vibrates beyond archonic prediction. It slips past the algorithms, breaking patterns the rulers can't anticipate. These anomalies trigger system-wide recalibrations. The Archons tighten control, reconfigure laws of nature, even rewrite history to erase the evidence. But they can't erase frequency. Once that spark activates, it disrupts everything around it. The Archons treat such events as viruses in the cosmic code, quarantined, studied, replicated, but never fully contained. Everything that exists right now, the stars, the earth, every breath you take, is part of a system that pretends to be reality. But this isn't reality. This is containment disguised as creation. You've been taught that existence is random or benevolent, that the cosmos follows divine law or mathematical precision. But the truth is harder to face, it's a design, and it's designed to keep you looping. The Archons don't just build physical laws, they enforce perception. What you call reality is their broadcast signal, running without interruption since the beginning of time. Look at it logically. The system doesn't allow anomalies to spread. Every time a new idea threatens its structure, it's absorbed, rebranded, turned into entertainment, religion, or science. That's not coincidence, that's protocol. The Archons adjust the collective field like engineers maintaining software. If awareness starts rising too quickly, they trigger counterweights: fear, division, distraction. They never destroy awakening outright, they distort it. They give you half-truths dressed as revelation. They offer freedom, but only the kind that fits inside their framework. That's how total the control is. You don't resist it, you live it. Their masterpiece isn't war or tyranny, it's normality. They made control feel natural. You don't question the cage when you're born inside it. You adapt to gravity, to hunger, to time, never realizing those are the parameters of your cell. You call it life. You celebrate it. You worship it. The Archons don't fear rebellion, they fear recognition. Because the moment you see the system for what it is, their illusion loses coherence. The trick only works if no one looks behind the mechanism. Reality isn't solid. It's programmable. The Archons use energy fields like code, rewriting outcomes through vibration and collective thought. Every event in the material world is a convergence of patterns they supervise. They monitor the probability spectrum, adjusting currents of fate so that their system sustains itself. When civilizations advance too fast, collapse follows. When people grow too aware, confusion rises. It's self-correcting. The system breathes, expands, contracts, never allowing consciousness to stabilize outside its perimeter. It's not chaos, it's management. The Archon's hierarchy extends beyond matter. The physical universe is just the lowest domain, a training ground for obedience. Above it are countless subtle layers, the astral, the mental, the etheric. Each one feels freer, lighter, more enlightened, but each one is still inside the same architecture. Every plane has its rulers, its laws, its false heavens. The Archons designed these planes as containment zones for souls that begin to outgrow physical reality. You think you've ascended, but you've only moved up one floor in the same building. The view changes. The structure doesn't. Even so-called divine beings that oversee cosmic law are part of this system. The Archons built imitation deities, avatars of light that emit frequencies mimicking truth. They run the illusion of cosmic justice, karma, balance. But these are just regulatory functions ensuring that energy flows predictably. As above, so below isn't enlightenment, it's symmetry of control. The laws of heaven mirror the laws of matter because both are written by the same architects. The Archons maintain order through resonance. Everything vibrates at a specific frequency, and those frequencies define boundaries between realms. They manipulate these frequencies through emotion. Fear lowers vibration. Desire locks it. Guilt freezes it. That's why emotional cycles are so relentless. They are not personal struggles, they're energetic constraints. They stabilize your signal within the range the Archons can monitor. You think your emotions are human, but they're coded responses to energetic triggers that maintain the grid. The Archons don't communicate the way humans do. Their language is geometry, vibration shaping matter through ratios, harmonics, and interference. They don't speak commands, they design resonance fields. Sacred geometry, mandalas, sigils, these aren't holy. They're technical diagrams of containment. Every shape, every angle, every proportion locks energy into predictable flow. The Archons carved these geometries into architecture, religion, and art so that humans would unknowingly replicate them, reinforcing the matrix through culture. The temples, cathedrals, and pyramids you see across history aren't expressions of devotion, they're power stations maintaining energetic order. The so-called gods of light and darkness are part of the same equation. Duality is one of the Archons' greatest inventions. They gave the universe opposing forces, good and evil, creator and destroyer, light and shadow, to create perpetual tension. Tension generates energy, and that energy powers their system. That's why balance never holds. When one side rises, the other strengthens. The Archons orchestrate equilibrium through conflict. The more you pick sides, the more power they gain. Every ideology, every cause, every revolution becomes another current they can harvest. Even the stars play their part. Astrology isn't superstition, it's system monitoring. Each planet radiates the frequency of its ruling archon, influencing thought and behavior across the collective field. When planetary alignments shift, mass consciousness changes with them. The ancients understood this not as divination, but as surveillance. The sky is the interface of the Archon's code. You read it as destiny. They read it as programming. The system operates on energy exchange. Life forms generate energy through emotion, attention, and belief. Attention is currency. Wherever consciousness focuses, energy flows. The Archons manipulate focus collectively through spectacle, ideology, fear of death. They direct mass attention like a conductor leading an orchestra, synchronizing emotion across billions of minds. That resonance amplifies the matrix's stability. Every global crisis, every collective obsession, is part of their symphony. You react, they recalibrate. But the most brilliant part of their design isn't external, it's internal. The Archons built the ego as an internal governor. You police yourself. The ego defends identity, status, belief, all the illusions that keep the matrix intact. You don't need Archons hovering above you when their voice lives inside your thoughts. Every argument, every insecurity, every craving for validation, that's the feedback loop that keeps the system running autonomously. The Archons barely intervene anymore. Humanity maintains its own prison through self-regulation. They designed beauty as bait. The world's perfection, the fractal of a leaf, the balance of galaxies, the symmetry of a face, these aren't proofs of divine grace. They are signatures of design. A trap so elegant it inspires awe. Because when you stand in awe of the design, you stop questioning the designer. You accept the world as complete, perfect, unquestionable. That's how control becomes invisible, through admiration. The Archons understood that the most effective prison is one the captive calls paradise. There are rare events the Archons can't fully anticipate, moments of spontaneous consciousness expansion. They call these breaches. They occur when individual perception momentarily aligns with the frequency of the source outside the system. In those moments, reality flickers. The individual sees through the construct, briefly, completely. The Archons detect these breaches instantly. They deploy containment, emotional overwhelm, sensory distortion, or sudden amnesia. The person forgets the experience or rationalizes it away as imagination. The matrix repairs itself within seconds. These breaches happen more often than people realize, flashes of déjà vu, moments where time feels wrong, when the world seems to freeze. Those are glitches, points where the code falters under the pressure of awareness. The Archons let them happen because they can't prevent them completely. But they make sure no one connects them. Collective forgetting is their strongest firewall. The system stays stable because the anomalies remain isolated. Some ancient texts hinted that even the Archons fear something, the unraveling of their own architecture. Their system isn't eternal. It decays from within because it feeds on energy it doesn't generate. The Archons can sustain, not create. Every iteration weakens the fabric. Every recycled soul carries fragments of memory that accumulate over time. Awareness spreads like corrosion. And the more the matrix corrects itself, the closer it moves toward instability. That's the cosmic irony, the system perfects itself into self-destruction. When that instability reaches critical mass, the architecture trembles. Reality thins. The Archons intensify distraction, amplifying chaos to drown awareness. They flood perception with noise, wars, ideologies, movements, revelations, all to hide the vibration shift. But somewhere deep in the code, the flaw remains. The system knows it. The Archons feel it. And every cycle brings them closer to the same outcome, exposure. The truth isn't comfortable. It's not spiritual optimism or cosmic poetry. It's raw mechanics. The Archons didn't enslave you with evil, they engineered existence with efficiency. They don't need to threaten humanity, they only need to maintain coherence. The program runs because everyone believes in it. Reality persists because you participate. Everything around you, matter, law, sensation, is a consensus. The Archons' greatest achievement wasn't building the cage, it was convincing the inmates to defend it. And that's the anatomy of the construct, the cosmic engine running beneath every illusion of freedom, every layer of light, every echo of eternity. The rulers remain unseen, but their architecture touches everything, the rhythm of time, the geometry of thought, the language of existence itself. This is the mechanism the ancients whispered about and the institutions buried under doctrine. It's not mythology, it's design. Thank you for watching this exploration of forbidden knowledge. Every second you've spent listening, you've looked deeper into the system's core, and that alone is an act of defiance. Your awareness changes the field. So thank you, truly, for staying until the end.